cup of tea and share a little story with you. A lot of people ask me about the carving, about how I got started, what tools you need to make a start in carving, and when I was a lad I started with a penknife, and one of the first knives I owned I saved up for all summer. I used to feed pheasant chicks back then and do some work for a local gamekeeper. And after several weeks I amassed about £12 and decided to go and buy a nice knife. My dad took me down to Jeff Turner's Outdoor People in Stowmarket, as it was then. He was a big old boy with a big red bushy beard, and he was not a jolly man, but he was a nice man. And he had the army surplus shop. You used to be able to buy anything in there: folding shovels, hand grenades, bloody camouflage clothing, knives, all sorts of took. So I used to like going in there, but you had to go with an adult. You wouldn't let kids in the shop. So I went in there with Dad and looked at these knives. There was one I'd taken a fancy to. It was a French Opinel number 12, which is quite a beast. It's a sorry old thing now, but it's had a very rough life. Had a lot of use. Yeah, so I learnt to carve with this. That was where I started, and taught me basically everything I know now about carving. I learnt from playing around with this as a child, and I learnt the hard way. I've got a lot of scars. Took the top clean off this finger. It was about 6 or 7 miles upriver. We gone camping for the weekend when I was at school. Me and a friend of mine called Michael Peart, and his dad dropped us off Friday evening. He was going to pick us up Sunday afternoon. It's a bank holiday weekend. And when he dropped us off, he said, "You boys haven't got any knives or anything silly on you?" "No, Mr. Peart, definitely not." "Well, I did. I had this in my pocket." Saturday morning we decided, good laugh, we'd do some spearfishing. So we went to the willow beds and we cut a sort of 7 or 8 foot pole. And I'm holding the pole like that, cutting the twigs off the side. I was holding it something like that with my finger sticking out, and I went chop, chop, chop. Nicked my finger. Didn't feel that bad, just felt it bump, you know. And look, I'm clean across the top, halfway down the nail, flat. You see the bone in the end. It's properly gone. Never did find it. So we ran back to the campsite with my hand in the air. And time I got back, my boots were full of blood and I was bleeding quite profusely. And basically wrapped it in kitchen roll and went and washed in the river, I think. Stuck it out till Sunday afternoon when they came and picked us up. The last thing I was going to do was admit that I'd had a knife in my pocket, so I kept my hand closed so they couldn't see the bit of tissue till we got home. They dropped me off back at my house, and I sort of scuttled off and went and washed it and everything. As soon as they'd gone, I said to Mum, "Oh Mum, I cut the top of my finger off." She said, "When did you do that?" I said, "Saturday morning." She said, "Oh, you daft bucky, you should have got..." And I said, "Yeah, I know, but I didn't want to tell Mr. Peart, you see." So Mum had a look and decided that needed washing and dressing properly. So she got in the car and went off down to, I think it was Solar back then, the supermarket in Coombsford. The pharmacy was still open, and she's down at the pharmacy counter and she says to the girl, she said, "Oh," said, "somebody's cut a finger off." She said, "What do I need to dress and clean it?" And the voice behind her said, "Oh, Janie, who's lost a finger?" So she told me, "Oh, Scott did." Well, that was Mrs. Peart, Peart's mum. She'd gone into the chemist for something. And she said, "What, has he just done it when they got back?" She said, "No, he did it while they were away." She said, "Well, they never said." And Mum said, I don't know then, you know, assuming that. So yeah, anyway, Mum came home, dressed me finger. But Mrs. Peart went home, confronted her son Michael. She said, "What happened to Scott's finger?" "Well, he's fainted." Came over backwards, smacked his head on the table and spent Sunday afternoon in A&E having his head sewn up. So yeah, that was a lesson learned. But yeah, so several scars from various cuts and bruises, but that's the thing with working with a knife, they are sharp and they do bite you. And Dad was quite old school. We were allowed to carry a knife, but before we took it out, he'd take it off us, and if it wasn't sharp, we weren't allowed to take it, or we weren't allowed to go. He always said you do yourself more mischief with a blunt knife than you would a sharp one. So he'd take it, shave the back of his hand with it. If it didn't shave, it wasn't sharp. So yeah, he taught me how to sharpen and look after a knife. You never know from looking at this one, but it was once a beautiful and fine tool. We were shooting one afternoon in the wood, and my brother Mikey said, "Oh lad, lend us your knife." He said, "I'll carve my name in a tree." Well, we were young and didn't know any better. So I lent him my knife, and I always said as my brother, he was one of the few people on earth I'd lend a knife to. So yeah, handed him the knife, and I'd seen a cock pheasant on the headland of Stony Pasture on the edge of the wood, and I decided I was going to stalk him down and have him for dinner. So off I go after this cock pheasant and leave Mikey picking away at the bark of this beech tree. About an hour later, I see Mikey and Neil stomping across the paddock, and it's getting dark by then. He said, "Come on lad, we're off." I said, "Right, I'm done here." Hadn't got the pheasant, but that didn't matter. We're walking across the paddock and there's my knife. "Oh, must have lost it." Well, I was fuming. So "What do you mean you lost it?" "I don't know." He said, "Must have fell out of my pocket, I've dropped it." I said, "Where?" He said, "I don't know." I said, "Where did you carve in the tree?" "The big birch tree next to, beech tree next to the path." So off we go back down this pathway. It's getting dark, but it can't be far, so either at the tree or somewhere in between. So I'm looking all along the path for my knife, no sign of it. Get to the tree, no sign of it. I said, "Well, where did you go?" He said, "Well, we just walked along the path." I said, "Well, it'd be here." "Don't know, but it's getting dark now, we've got no hope of finding it." Well, I spent days looking for that. Walked that path 100 times. Never found it. And that was about a year later. We were sitting in the back garden at Mother's there, and we were having a smoke and a drink one evening, and I don't know what we were doing now. We got around to talking about knives again. I said, "God, I don't know if I missed that old knife." I bought a new one by then. I saved up for a whole season, and I went and bought a big old buck woodsman, big gnarly Bowie knife looking thing. And yeah, lovely tool like, but it wasn't my knife. I missed it. Yeah, we sat there and I was lamenting the loss of my knife. Meekins was sitting with us, and he said to Mikey, he said, "You never did tell him, did you?" I said, "Tell me what?" He said, "That knife." I said, "What, the one he lost?" He said, "He never lost it, he broke it." I said, "You didn't, did he?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Carving in the tree, snapped the point off it." They're quite a brittle knife, these. They're high carbon steel, so they don't take any bending. And he snapped about 1/4 of an inch off the point. I said, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" He said, "Well, I thought you'd be angry." I said, "Well, I would have been." I said, "But I'd still like your knife back." I said, "Where is it then?" He said, "Oh, we buried it." I said, "Oh, come on." So Meekins said, "Well, come on, we'll go up there and go and look for it." And we piled into Meekins' car. Neely Brown said, I'm gonna take a rain check, I'm going in for my tea." So he got on his bike and buggered off. So me, Mike and Meekins all got in this little, I don't know what it was now, a little hatchback, and off we went to Finborough. We walked the wood to the tree. You'll see M, I, K and half an E carved on this tree. I should have realised he never finished the carving. He said, yeah, that's where I buried it. So we started digging around the roots of this old beech tree. No sign of it. I say, you sure that's where you buried it? Yeah, he said, right there. What's that? Can't find it. He said, it rusted away. I said, don't be daft, it took 100 years to rust away. I said, that's not here. And he said, well, I stuffed it in a molehill. He said, perhaps the moles have moved it. So we dug a bit more and a bit more. And basically, we ended up digging half the bloody roots of this tree up looking for this knife. Couldn't find it. It's then getting dark again, so off we head home. We get back, we're sitting back in the garden finishing our drink. Neely Brown comes back on his bike. He's had his dinner and decided to head out again. He said, did you find it? I said, nah, ain't there. He said, well, I know that. And I said, well, how do you know that? And he said, got it here. And he pulled it out of his jeans pocket. I said, how come you've got it? He said, I went back a couple of days later and dug it up. He said, I didn't want to leave it there. I said, so what, so he's broke it and you've nicked it? And he said, well, yeah. I said, you're all really bad friends. I said, look. So I took it back off him. See, by the way the blade was stuck in the handle, there was a lot missing. I opened her up and yeah, it's flat across the tip. But about halfway down the blade, there's about an inch missing off the cutting edge. I said, what the hell have you done to this now? When he tried to undo a screw on his bike and he put it in like that and turned it. And of course he shattered all the edge off the blade. So it was a sorry looking mess. But yeah, over several afternoons sat on an oil stone and a whetstone, I managed to grind somewhat of a point back on it. It was never sharp again, but I did get a point as such. Took enough metal off to get back to a beveled edge and got it sharp. But it's never quite the same, you know. Bit bad. And another afternoon I left it stuck in a gate post. We gutted 2 rabbits, and rather than shut it with all the blood and guts on it, I stuck it in the gate post till we finished. Walked up the headland. As we were walking back, I see Mikey mounted. We had a shotgun by then. He mounted the gun to his shoulder and took a shot. I thought he'd seen a rabbit on the headland. I couldn't see it. Next thing I see, my knife disappears into the field. He shot the bugger off the top of the post. If you look there, look, there's still lead shot stuck in the handle. Blown a big old piece of wood off. So, yeah. Had a tough life, poor old thing. But the other day I decided, now it's retired, it sits on the shelf as a reminder of where I came from and how I started. I'd buy a new one. So I purchased this. Paid 16 quid for that. I paid 12 quid for that about 35 years ago. So it's still good value for money, I think. You can see the difference there on what was missing off the top. But I learnt a valuable lesson that day, and I've never lent a knife to anyone ever since. Because no one will look after it like you look after your own knife, even your brother. So yeah, so I've got one back now. I'm going to carve again with this one, and straight away as soon as I hold it, it feels right. I remember where I left off now. That's just a lovely knife for whittling and carving. So yeah, I'm going to enjoy going back to the start and learning to really carve again. I think that's still a lot of lessons to be learnt there. So yeah, just thought I'd share that with you while I'm floating on the river. Thankfully, canoeing is one of the few pastimes and sports where they recommend you do have a knife with you, so legally we're alright. It's just ideal for this. Also keep it dry. Obviously the high carbon steel, so it rusts like hell if you get it wet or don't look after it, but they're going to crash into the bushes. Hang on. side of this one, shall we? Shaves, so Dad would have been happy with that. But he was a fishmonger, so he knew how to sharpen the knife. Never used a stone, he always used a butcher's steel. He wouldn't touch a knife on a stone. He was very much of the opinion that you should keep it sharp rather than have to sharpen it. So we said if you stay ready, you haven't got to get ready, and he wouldn't let a knife get blunt in the first place, so you never had to go to the steel or go to a stone to sharpen it. You just touch it up on a steel and that was back to razor blade sharp. So we'll still live by his teachings where that's concerned. Right, I'll finish with tea and head back and get some breakfast. Right, catch you later.